The nuclear bombs that murdered hundreds of thousands of people is the best thing to be invented for humanity. Hey Slavic Vikings, and welcome to a video where I will explore the philosophical and ethical question of the existence of nuclear-based weapons. The title might sound crazy, but give me a chance. The nuclear bomb is often exclaimed to be the deadliest weapon on Earth. I know it's a bit autistic to look at human deaths purely statistically, but it's important for the further context of the video. It is estimated that the AK-47, also known as the Kalashnikov rifle, has killed over 25 million people since its invention in 1947. This makes it the deadliest weapon in human history. Not to mention guns in general killed around 1 billion people alone. Clearly, China and India recognize the danger of these two weapons, since they agreed to not use any firepower or nukes, obviously, in their conflict over Kashmir. Modern weapons are so deadly in general that even when global superpowers are fighting over a highly valuable trade route, they decide to engage in a form of play fighting with sticks and rocks. This is a good place to transition to my next point, that being the human ego. The only reason wars ever happen is because it doesn't affect the people who decide on the wars to forego. Leaders are the ones who decide on wars, so we will focus on their mentality during this argument. All wars up to the Second World War have been fought through weapons that don't affect the bottom line of the ruling party. The nuclear bomb is the first weapon in history to change this. No rational leader on Earth will ever start a nuclear war, because then they themselves will probably die, or in the best case scenario, diminish their quality of life. This concept is called MAD, or MAD, or Mutually Assured Destruction. Today, MAD still holds on. No rational leader is willing to initiate a nuclear war, knowing it would result in catastrophic consequences. It's not just about the loss of life, but also about the substantial damage to a country's infrastructure, economy, and the well-being of its citizens. Although at the end of the day, all that matters is the well-being of the leader. I'm going to oversimplify now a bit for the sake of brevity, but Putin attacked Ukraine because Ukraine gave away their nuclear missiles a couple decades ago, and its independence wasn't guaranteed by any country. So Putin can comfortably sit in his mansion knowing that Ukraine can't affect him directly. This war might be devastating for millions of Russians and Ukrainian lives and ruin the economy of Russia through sanctions, but none of this matters for Putin, since he will just make more money from state-controlled oil sales. The worst part of this is that I am not even trying to attack Putin specifically. Every war in history is a consequence of the ego of ruling leaders. For example, this also applies to the US. George W. Bush could comfortably start the war on terror in the Middle East, causing mayhem for millions of lives because he could just sit comfortably in the White House worrying about his public support. I could keep giving examples of this, but I think you get the point. Nuclear weapons are the embodiment of communism. Except instead for engaging with workers' rights, it engages with soldiers' rights. The rights for war to affect everybody, not only poor conscripts. Nukes don't care about your political standing. Everyone will die if World War III happens. The goal of communism is to destroy the economic privilege of the rich, and the nuclear bomb destroys leaders' privilege to not engage directly in war. I'm not sure what was the point of making such a comparison, so I'll move on. I was intentionally very clear with my wording earlier when I said No rational leader on Earth will ever start a nuclear war. No rational leader. The concept of mutually assured destruction keeping us safe is only applicable if the person with the power to start such war is completely rational. So far this seems to be the case, but humans are not rational, and country leaders are human. And I would say that this is the only viable counter-argument for nuclear weapons. However, I would say that the small risk of countries' leaders going rogue and starting World War III is worth the global peace that we have witnessed over the past decades. When Oppenheimer invented the nuclear bomb and President Truman decided to drop 2 of them on Japan, the world changed forever. And for a brief moment, the USA had a monopoly on nuclear arms. However, the Soviets quickly developed their own nuclear bombs, perhaps with a little help from spies, starting the Cold War. Cold Wars are the only real global wars that we are going to experience from now on. However, not forever, since I idealistically believe that one day the world will be united. Until then, it is my personal belief that we should move towards regional integration. Regional integration movements like the EU, ASEAN or the African Union are the most viable way to prevent Cold War mentalities or geopolitical fighting for influence. The development of nuclear energy for military purposes and nuclear weapons was closely linked during World War II. The Manhattan Project, a top-secret US government initiative, brought together brilliant scientists like J. Robert Oppenheimer and Niels Bohr to create the first atomic bomb. However, other scientists like Enrico Fermi developed nuclear energy. Nuclear energy was seen as a promising new source of power. It was clean, efficient, and could generate large amounts of electricity. Governments and industries around the world heavily invested in nuclear power, and the number of nuclear reactors in operation grew rapidly. In the United States, the first commercial nuclear power plant was opened in 1957. But by the late 1970s, there were over 100 nuclear reactors in operation, generating about 10% of the country's electricity. Nuclear power was also widely adopted in other developed countries, such as the United Kingdom, Japan, and especially France. This was all nice and dandy until public support for nuclear power began to decline after a series of accidents in the 1970s and 80s. The most notable of these was the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979. In this accident, a partial meltdown occurred at a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania. No one was killed or injured, but the accident caused widespread fear and anxiety about nuclear power. Another major accident occurred in 1986 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. This accident was much more serious than the 3 Mile Island, resulting in the deaths of 31 people and the displacement of thousands more. The Chernobyl accident had a devastating impact on public trust in nuclear power, and it led to a decline in nuclear investment construction around the world, especially in Poland and other European countries. This modern disgust towards nuclear energy also has a beautiful context of human rationality having a big impact on its development. According to the World Health Organization, the total number of deaths from nuclear energy accidents is 4,200. This number includes both direct deaths and deaths from long-term health problems caused by radiation exposure. The vast majority of these deaths occurred in the aftermath of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. The Chernobyl disaster was the worst nuclear power plant accident in history, and it resulted in the deaths of over 3,000 people. Another nuclear accident that has resulted in deaths include the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in 2011. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster resulted in the deaths of over 1,000 people, but these deaths were not directly caused by radiation exposure. Now, looking at it from a different perspective, air pollution from coal combustion caused 7.8 million deaths in 2020. Coal combustion is the largest single source of outdoor air pollution, and it is responsible for about 40% of all deaths from air pollution. The vast majority of these deaths occur in developing countries, where coal is the primary source of energy. In China, for example, coal combustion causes over 1.8 million deaths each year. India is also heavily reliant on coal, and coal combustion causes over 1.1 million deaths each year. Coal also contributes to climate change, which is obviously a major threat to human health. In addition to health and environmental costs, coal is also a major economic burden. Coal subsidies cost taxpayers around the world an estimated 500 billion each year. This money could be used to invest in clean energy sources, such as solar and wind power, or nuclear power, which would create jobs and improve public health. A couple thousand deaths versus millions of deaths caused by coal. The only difference is that coal's negative effects are less direct and less scandalous. And humans, being the irrational, naked monkeys, get scared by nuclear energy. Not to mention, nuclear isotopes are used in a variety of medical procedures, such as cancer treatment and diagnosis imaging. I truly believe that if humanity acted more rationally, at least when it comes to nuclear things, we would be better off. Nuclear leaders have to act rationally to not start World War III, and the general populace of democracies have to act rationally and see the true benefits and disadvantages of nuclear energy. The real disadvantage of nuclear energy is its production cost and time sacrificed. It often takes decades for nuclear reactors to be built, with the costs being very high. However, the technology is constantly improving, and even with what we've got, it's the most viable energy source. Nuclear research has slowed down significantly over the last years, because of the earlier mentioned disasters. However, in part because of Putin, nuclear energy is slowly coming back. I would like to make an entire video on nuclear energy, so let me know in the comments if you would be interested in that. But let's get back on track with nuclear bombs. The monopoly of nuclear weapons is one of the most controversial issues in international security. On one hand, it is argued that the monopoly of nuclear weapons by the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, or the P5, the United States, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom, helps to deter war and maintain global order. On the other hand, it is argued that the monopoly of nuclear weapons is undemocratic and unfair, and that it gives the P5s too much power over the rest of the world. However, this plan for the world order failed, with 4 other countries also acquiring nuclear weapons. The P5 acquired nuclear weapons through a variety of means. Like I mentioned earlier, the United States acquired nuclear weapons first, in 1945. The Soviet Union acquired nuclear weapons in 1949, the United Kingdom in 1952, France in 1960, and China in 1964. Since then, 4 other countries have acquired nuclear weapons: India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. India and Pakistan acquired nuclear weapons in the late 90s, following a series of tit-for-tat nuclear tests. North Korea acquired nuclear weapons in the early 2000s, after withdrawing from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. North Korea acquiring nukes just worsened its relations with the world and made it close in on itself even more. The nuclear powers have intervened on several occasions to stop other countries from acquiring nuclear weapons. For example, in 1981, Israel bombed an Iraqi nuclear reactor that was believed to be close to producing weapons-grade plutonium. In 2007, Israel also destroyed a Syrian nuclear reactor that was under construction. The nuclear powers have also imposed sanctions on countries that are suspected of developing nuclear weapons programs. For example, Iran has been under severe sanctions for many years because of its suspected nuclear program. Nuclear weapons have sometimes been used as false arguments for war. For example, in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq under the pretext that Iraq was developing weapons of mass destruction. However, no such weapons were ever found in Iraq. The fewer countries that have nuclear weapons, the less chance there is of nuclear war. This is because the chance of a leader going crazy goes down with the less of them exist, obviously. In practice, nuclear weapons prevent an invasion from another power for the rest of history. No country is willing to invade another country that has nuclear weapons, because they know that they will face nuclear retaliation. This is why nuclear deterrence has been so effective in preventing major wars since World War II. However, this isn't completely true, since the USSR, which was the biggest nuclear power for the time, collapsed internally despite having these weapons. And this seems to be the only real way nuclear powers can collapse nowadays. In conclusion, nukes are the sole reason we aren't fighting World War III right now, and I'm open for different perspectives, so make sure to leave a comment, and as always, farewell, żegnam, and goodbye.